While at a hair appointment, this young lady suddenly complained of a sharp pain in her head. When her hairdresser checked it out, she stumbled on something terrible that made her call the cops immediately. 14-year-old Irene had been thinking of getting her hair done for a while now, but she never expected that this particular trip to the salon would be something unlike the others. The little girl sat in the vast salon, looking through the mirror as other ladies got pretty. There were enough hands in the building to go around, but little Irene waited for Tori, her favorite stylist, to be done with the client's hair she was perming. Having patronized her for 3 years, Irene was confident in Tori's skills as a hairdresser and could not trade her for the other top-notch stylists around. After a few minutes, Tori emerged beside Irene, flashing a toothy grin at the young lady as she beamed in delight. She was too excited for the new look Tori would give her and tried with great trouble to contain the tingles coursing through her body. "The usual?" Tori asked, getting ready to work her magic, but Irene gave her a negative. "It's my niece's christening on Sunday," she said, "and I want to look breathtaking for the after party." Without delay, the 23-year-old stylist got her equipment ready and went straight to business. Both the stylist and her client gleamed as they dabbled into their usual topics of discussion, unaware of the devastating series of events that would transpire mere minutes later. As Tori navigated through Irene's hair to get the perfect style, a sharp hissing sound stopped her in place. Thinking she might have somehow injured the little girl, she quickly let go and examined her through the mirror's reflection. From this position, the sight worried Tori, who ran to her side in a heartbeat, asking if there was a problem. But as quickly as the pain came, it eased up before completely. Seconds later, the pain-stricken Irene was as good as new, as if nothing had happened earlier. With the strange episode over, the 14-year-old sighed briefly before asking Tori to continue her job. It took the stylist a few seconds to recover from the shock that had overcome her at that moment, but soon after, she snapped out of it and motioned to do as requested. Despite Irene's apparent state of control, Tori still could not shake off the bad feeling that kept creeping up on her. So, she began to ask the slew of questions in her mind. Did the headaches happen often? Had she gotten it checked at the hospital? Was she treating it? Additionally, with concern etched in her voice, Tori suggested they went for basic perming and nothing elaborate to be on the safe side. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell for more amazing stories. However, Irene turned her offer down calmly and politely, passing the sudden headache off as the usual side effect of the all-nighter she pulled for a pop quiz the previous day. With great reluctance, Tori continued to make her hair like she wanted. Although she struggled to believe her and undermine what she had just witnessed, she accepted that she still had her duty as a hairdresser to fulfill. So like that, they moved on from the bizarre incident and focused solely on making Irene extra pretty. But minutes later, they encountered another problem. Like earlier, Irene flinched and clutched the same side of her head again, and just like before, she calmed down after a few seconds. Confused, yet curious about the bizarre and patterned occurrence, Tori decided to investigate. Gently, she peered in the spot where Irene felt the sharp pain, searching through golden brown strands of hair for anything out of the ordinary. However, after minutes of mindless searching, she found nothing unusual in the area. Deciding that the headache must have been caused by fatigue, as Irene deduced, she gave up her little quest and returned to business. But not long after, she spotted something odd on her head. A little, shiny bump was in the center of Irene's scalp. Tori frowned at the sight, as she had never seen something like that on the girl for the 3 years she had served as her favorite hairdressers. Immediately, she informed the 14-year-old about her little observation, hoping she might have answers to the bizarre bump. However, Irene was just as lost as she was, having no answer for the bizarre find. Gently, Tori prodded the bump with her comb to have a better understanding of what she might be looking at. When Irene didn't react to the mild touch, the hairstylist was convinced it was probably a skin reaction and advised Irene to visit the dermatologist. But as she was about to carry on with her work, Tori saw something that made the blood in her veins freeze with dread. It appeared as if something was moving inside the bump. Tori froze, hoping her imagination was playing tricks on her, but she realized it was real when she spotted movement for a second time. Once again, she gently prodded at it with her comb, only to realize the grave mistake she had just made seconds later. Irene suddenly shouted and clutched her head. Something about this particular episode seemed different and more frightening than the previous ones. The 14-year-old didn't suck it up, as the headache was not as bearable as last time. "My head feels like it's about to explode," she hissed amidst bouts of pain, gripping the chair handle until her knuckle turned pale white. Irene writhed in pain for a while before having a seizure and passing out. Immediately, Tori screamed, fearing the worst. The other patrons in the salon gathered around Irene's form on the ground, panicking like the frightened hairstylist. While in shock, as Irene lay on the floor, barely conscious, she could not help but think about the past few days and the terrible headache that had plagued her for a few days. She brushed it off, believing it would pass once she had proper sleep. But when it persisted for a week, even after sufficient naps, worry soon enveloped her. Irene was never a fan of medicine, and for the duration, the first bout of headaches lasted. She never took painkillers, only relying on her belief that sleep could cure her. But as it got worse, the young lady eventually turned to the medicine she detested. A week later, however, there were no significant changes. Instead, it came at intervals, intensifying each time. Furthermore, it lasted for a few seconds on some days, but other times it lasted for minutes. The longest she had experienced this was 5 minutes, and this was after P and school. When it got worse, she would take painkillers and sleeping meds, hoping her body would recover after a bit of rest. But such relief never came, and the headaches got so bad that they were blinding, often making her disoriented and sick. Tired of the constant pain, Irene visited the school nurse one day. However, nothing new came out of the meeting, as the nurse reassured the young teenager that she was only suffering from stress. Seeking a second opinion, the young girl reached out to their family doctor, hopeful for a more viable solution. Luckily, the doctor prescribed stronger painkillers and urged her to prioritize rest. Following her doctor's instructions, Irene took her medicine judiciously and maintained a healthy eating and sleeping pattern. But her efforts, the headaches still crept in occasionally, although it had lessened considerably in duration and intensity. Irene kept her condition a secret from her parents. She believed they'd already had a lot on their plates, especially with her older sister, who had just given birth. So, she bore the weight of her physical distress alone, believing that it was just a minor case. If only she had known, it would be much more severe. As she lay on the cold ground, she was overwhelmed with fear as she believed the end was near. Suddenly, she regretted her past decisions. Things would have turned out differently if she had known better and told her parents, like any typical teenager. Despite the troubling situation at home, her father might have scoured the ends of the earth to find life-saving solutions, and her mother would have probably dug up old connections for her sake. Distantly, her fuzzy mind registered the sound of sirens echoing in the streets. Then the cops and first responders appeared at her side before whisking her away. It felt surreal to Irene to think that a bit of headache had led up to this point. Now, days after visiting the doctor, she found herself in the hospital once more. But time, under much graver circumstances, this dreadful realization was the last known memory the little girl had before slipping deep into unconsciousness. Doctors were puzzled by the entire ordeal, As it was unlike anything they had ever seen before, they could think of running the appropriate test to find out the root cause of her illness. They focused on stabilizing the 14-year-old after calming her down and successfully administering an IV drip. They began digging around, seeking clues to help determine her diagnosis. Meanwhile, Irene's distraught parents and relatives, who had rushed to the hospital on getting the news, felt helpless when they couldn't provide the medical experts the information they needed. However, with their permission, they ran the necessary tests. Based on the guilt-ridden Tori's account, the bump on Irene's head seemed to be the most probable cause of her current predicament. So, without further delay, the medical team quickly conducted the necessary tests, unaware of the devastating impact the results would have on everyone present. While the results were underway, Irene finally woke up, but something about her struck her family, making them more worried and scared. Instead of feeling disoriented and dizzy, the young appeared normal and up to speed. This uncharacteristic behavior shocked everyone in the room. Quickly, the medical team examined her, thoroughly checking for anything amiss in her body while asking questions regarding her health in recent times. It was at this point that Irene spilled the truth about her frequent headaches to her family, baffled by the revelation. Her family hoped for the best pending the results of the medical tests. However, when it finally came, it threw them off in horror and surprise. The results from the CT scan revealed a stunning diagnosis. Irene suffered from both melanoma, a deadly skin disease, and a rare brain tumor. The news sent not just Irene's family, but also the medical experts reeling. The idea of a child having two concurrent life-threatening diseases at the same time was unprecedented in most of their careers as doctors, and despite suffering from such conditions for an extended period, Irene still remained relatively fine and asymptomatic. The doctors emphasized that the most pressing concern was the skin disease, which was the bump Tori had initially noticed. They explained that the melanoma was more aggressive and fast-spreading, and thus required immediate attention. Then, as for the brain tumor, the doctor explained that it was lying benign, and since it was small and slow-spreading, determining the exact nature of the disease was nearly impossible, be that as it may. Both diseases required immediate treatment as they were still budding and not life-threatening yet. With that in mind, the doctors motioned to schedule Irene for surgery as soon as possible, first to remove the tumor and next to prevent the spread of both diseases. Irene's family struggled to process everything but still did as the doctor recommended. They knew the journey ahead was not easy, but regardless, they stuck around every step of the way, showering little Irene with all the love and support she needed. That took the efforts of 2 skilled neurosurgeons and a few other medical practitioners. Since Irene's case was extraordinary, many medical staff volunteered to partake in her surgery, looking forward to the new experiences they would gain along the way. The doctors announced that the surgery was a success, as they had completely removed all the cancerous cells. At the announcement, Irene's family breathed a collective sigh of relief. Although they knew she wasn't out of the woods yet, they were happy they had crossed the greater part of the hurdle. From then on, Irene's family began their arduous and long journey to recovery. Their undying support gave Irene the boost of confidence she desired, one she never imagined she could get. Now, she realized how much of a mistake she had made when she decided to keep her minor condition a secret. Weeks later, Irene's doctor finally gave the family the news they had anticipated since the surgery. The 14-year-old was finally in remission, which meant that she was free from the melanoma and brain tumor that plagued her. Excited by the news, Irene's family threw a little celebratory party for their little princess. Relieved that the entire ordeal was finally behind them, many friends attended this party, including Tori, Irene's trusted hairdresser. As soon as she saw Irene, the young lady did the most surprising thing. She begged Irene for forgiveness. Ever since the little girl's admission into the hospital, Tori could not shake the feeling that she was partially to blame for it. Each day, she fought the chilling sense of guilt, yet she didn't know how to approach her or ask for forgiveness. The best thing she could do was to pray for her safety while checking in on her regularly, although from a distance. Now that she stood face to face with her, her senses urged her to do the needful and rid herself of the guilt. The sudden admission took Irene aback. She found it hard to believe that her favorite hairstylist had beaten herself up for a wholesome mistake she had committed alone. To clear the air, Irene surprised Tori with her following words. "You didn't do anything wrong. Tori, in fact, you did the right thing. Your quick thinking saved my life." Tori's eyes glistened with unshed tears at the sweet words. Irene went on to explain the events that had led up to her collapse at the salon and the turn of events that followed at the hospital, all of which she deemed was not Tori's fault. The teenager added that if anything, she was grateful to Tori, who had spotted the disease in the first place since she was asymptomatic. There was no way the doctors could have spotted the melanoma on time. Had she not gone for her hair appointment that day, it was highly unlikely she would have spotted the concealed bump on the crown of her head. Irene's story was one out of a bizarre tale. One miraculous trip to the salon saved her life that day. Ultimately, she walked out of the situation 100 times better than before. The young girl also learned a few life lessons along the way. The first one, which was the most obvious, was never to underestimate any health issues, regardless of how big or small a problem they pose at the moment. Furthermore, she also learned about the value of including her family in her struggles. Lastly, she understood the essence of keeping people like Tori attentive and intentional within her circle. Due to the experiences that accompanied these lessons, her story changed drastically forever. And Irene never grew to forget this lone fact. What an incredible story. What do you think about Irene's luck that day? Have you ever witnessed something similar before? Let us know in the comments below. Binding bonds through beautiful tales. Thank you for watching.